All right, I think we're live. Great. Hey, everybody. Welcome to CKAMAs. Tonight's guest has made a name for himself within the web development world with his contributions to online and offline education through Galvanize, Udacity, Udemy, YouTube, and now Springboard. His legendary web development course on Udemy alone attracted over 700,000 students, proving both the value of his teaching as well as the need for this type of education. An advocate for online education and the need for an innovation in this space, he's most recently partnered with Springboard to launch the software engineering career track, which guarantees students a job, undoubtedly changing the lives of countless more ambitious students' lives willing to make a change. Please turn your cameras on, unmute yourselves, and help me in welcoming the man behind one of Udemy's most legendary web development courses, Colt Steele. Welcome, Colt.
Welcome.
How you doing, Colt?
Oh,
Colt.
that has to be the most intense welcome I've ever received. Like the introduction, thank you.
Yeah, can't tell if that's a good or a bad thing.
Oh, no, that's good. I don't think I've ever had anybody really say anything other than this is Colt. So that's I appreciate it.
No, your track record really makes that that one quite an easy one. So I actually would love to just begin talking about in general, like what really like kind of drives your desire to really teach people, and why do you think that this is such an important thing to do both like offline and online? Why is this like an important topic to you in general?
So as a kid, I wanted to be a teacher, not necessarily teaching coding or anything around computers. I wanted to teach science. I was obsessed with like the chemistry experiments and explosions and biology and all of that stuff in middle school. And that's what I wanted to do. I did a lot of tutoring in high school, and I just enjoyed that. I think a lot of people who haven't taught before, or maybe have had, everyone's had good and bad teachers, or hopefully everyone's had the opportunity to have a good teacher at some point. When you do, it makes it clear, that there's a lot of work that goes into it, and that it's not getting up and reciting something or reading from a textbook, even though I had many teachers who did that as well. So I had a couple of teachers who I was just really inspired by, and I wanted to be a teacher. They happened to be science teachers. But then I guess reality got in the way, and it just, my family, I talked to some teachers, they kind of pushed me away from it, to be honest, just because of how difficult it can be, and it's super unfortunate. But that was kind of the very beginning of me wanting to teach, and I put that on the back burner for a while, and then went on a long journey through music industry, and then coding, and then eventually teaching coding. So for me, what's most important, honestly, a lot of people don't like to hear this, but I would be happy teaching anything. I guess not anything on earth, but I would be happy teaching other topics as well. But my passion is more for teaching first over programming. Not that I don't like coding and programming, but I just enjoy the challenge of the teaching. There are a lot of people are approach it the other way around, which is totally valid. Being an engineer who happens to who's gone into teaching. I guess I would say I prefer the sort of flipped version of being a teacher who happens to teach coding. Anyway, that's kind of why I'm doing it, I guess. I mean, it's all, a series of accidents and nothing very deliberate that suddenly, you look down and you're standing in the spot that you're at. It's never, for me at least, was not the course I had plotted, years ago. It just kind of ended up here and stumbled my way through. But I'm super happy to be teaching, and it's what I enjoy the most.
Yeah, I feel definitely that you would pick up on a lot of patterns as you've taught so many people, right? I would like to, I guess, if you could address maybe some of those patterns that you've noticed over the years, and what are like certain pitfalls that are kind of common with most new developers, and like when they are trying to learn and acquire the skill set, and what do you advise people to do preemptively to kind of prepare for those types of obstacles?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of real challenges to get around the first one that I think a lot of people, especially if you're just starting out, a lot of people face is just a general like paralysis based off of how many choices there are and how many options and decisions it seems like you have to make. And everyone makes them seem life or death, not life or death, but they're, do or die. You have to learn this tool, this framework, this language. There's so many things. I remember when I was learning, I learned to code in a very sort of sandboxed way when I was young. It had nothing to do with web development or making anything useful. It was like a little robotics kit that my dad got me when I was 13 or 12 or something like that. So I knew the basics of programming, but I could make nothing at all. And when I got to high school, I would go to like Barnes and Noble or Borders and look at different programming books and try and find, was I going to learn Java or was I going to do C or Python? And I mean, back then there were way fewer blog posts and articles and YouTube videos telling you that you have to learn this one and not that one. So even back then there was less noise, but I still didn't really know where to start. And then today, even if you've decided on one language, let's say you've decided on JavaScript, which already for a lot of people is not the easiest choice to make right away. It's not all that clear sometimes. But if you have within that, there's still all these different tools and frameworks and libraries. Do you learn React or Angular or Vue or something else? What's the order you learn things in? It just becomes a little bit paralyzing. And I've seen that happen with a lot of students. And I think that's why things like my Udemy courses, boot camps that are online, like why they're appealing to people and why there's a whole industry around it is that for better or for worse, there's just so many choices. And it seems difficult when you're starting out. But what most people, and I'm sure everyone's heard this a million times, but what nobody really tells you when you're starting out is that it doesn't matter all that much. And that once you get past your first or second framework or library or tool, that you'll be able to pick anything else up when needed. And that fear, or that anxiety of not knowing something goes away pretty quickly when you discover that pretty much the job of being an engineer or a developer is not knowing something and being able to know it eventually. And that's what it is, repeated over and over. Some tool that you don't know, some challenge you've been tasked with that you don't know how to solve. Most of your day-to-day life, I won't say most of it, but a lot of the day-to-day life is having to figure something out that you just don't know when you wake up that morning. So when you're starting out, that's a little bit intimidating. And I've just seen a lot of students really struggle with that. And, I get so many questions about, should I learn this first or this thing first? Am I wrong? I learned Angular first, but now I see React as the #1 trending framework. Should I go back and learn React instead? And those sort of things I think can be counterproductive to some extent. Now, obviously, you don't want to be learning something from 30 years ago. Although I keep hearing about COBOL with this virus and how many new jobs there are for that, this ancient programming language. But for the most part, I think as long as you're learning something that is relevant to today's world and you're able to master it, you'll be able to master anything else eventually. So that's one pitfall, definitely. Another thing would be programming is one of those skills that is a little bit different to teach and definitely to learn compared to, I mentioned biology earlier, where I love biology, but a lot of it is really listening to something or reading something. And at least the test that I had, it was kind of, can you spit this back at me or can you recall this information? What are the 5 stages of what, I don't even know how many stages, mitosis or whatever it was. So I had to, recall those exact words. With programming, it's pretty different where you'll learn something, hopefully from watching a video or attending a lecture or going to a workshop, but then you're not really learning to code from that. You're learning to code from you going and practicing and doing stuff. It's more like learning art. If you take a class in art, a teacher might be able to demonstrate different strategies for shading, or here's how you can draw something in perspective, or here are some approaches for whatever, mixing colors or different shades. But they're not going to show you how to paint every picture, or most of the time not even paint one picture. Like, your job is to then go and practice that all. So for a lot of students, they approach it as like a mathematical discipline, or like any class that you might take in biology, as I mentioned, where you're just going to hang on to every word that somebody says and then try and regurgitate that and take it all to heart. And that's important, but it's far more important to actually get the practice and do things. And make your own projects, make your own, even just tiny little assignments. Or, you know, in my courses, one of the things that definitely is frustrating about teaching online is that you have no real control over, this sounds a little bit evil, you have no control over students. I don't mean that in a mastermindy way, but in a classroom, I can very quickly look around and see which students are actually doing the work, or who's looking bored and falling asleep, or who's way ahead of this or way lost. Online, I can say things like, at least on Udemy or on YouTube, I can say things like, this is really important that you attempt this portion on your own, pause the video and do X, but there's no real mechanism, or there's no way for me to check that somebody's doing that, at least until some of the stuff I've been doing more recently. But in general, that's another pitfall I've noticed, something a lot of beginners neglect to, I don't even think they're ignoring it. I think they don't realize how important it is, because depending on your background in academics and sort of what your previous educational experience is, you may not have had many courses where really the onus is on you doing the work and making things. And if there was a textbook, like in biology or whatever it is, in programming, that textbook is your computer and it's Google, and you have access to it at all times. And there's never a closed book assessment or a closed book time in your life where you're expected to memorize things. So I just see a lot of students come in and they write down flashcards and take notes furiously throughout every lecture. And they're doing a great job at being a student, but for the wrong type of course. So I don't mean to discourage somebody who likes to take notes. That's not at all what I would say. But I would say focus on really synthesizing and practicing what you're learning, and not memorizing it or just regurgitating it.
Yeah, that's definitely something that people kind of get trained to do for such a long time that it gets kind of hard to rewire you or yourself, or like rethink about how you can actually go about doing so. With that in mind, if you were to just like start completely from scratch, and I think this is actually Antonio, if Antonio's in the audience tonight, he actually asked this question on the thread, but I thought it was actually quite a good one. If you were just to start like from scratch all over again, what would be kind of like that step-by-step progression of you learning web development? I think that there are certain like key fundamentals that actually like transfer regardless of like what language you're learning. Curious to see what your take on that would be.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about web development specifically, ignoring back end and front end and all of that, I think whether you are doing something on the back end one day or on the front end, you're still going to need a basic understanding of HTML and CSS. And so those are pretty quick wins for a lot of people that I don't know where everyone's experience level is at right now, but learning HTML is, for a lot of people, surprisingly easy. And they have this image of what it's like in their mind, and that it's complicated and you have to be a genius. It's really just like picking from a sticker book and putting things on a page where you want them, or picking from a set of crayons or whatever. This is a horrible analogy, but basically it's easy compared to something like JavaScript or Python or any programming language, a true programming language. So for a lot of people, I like to have them start there, because at least it's a quick win and it's useful. You're going to need it because you just can't avoid that stuff if you're doing anything around the web. And then I usually recommend people learn JavaScript. I would say if you know exactly what you want to do, which a lot of people don't when they're starting out, it might make sense for you to go somewhere else instead of JavaScript. But for the most part, I recommend JavaScript these days, because really I have a couple reasons. One, it's just so prevalent in all of programming, or in web at least. Two, lots of jobs in JavaScript, obviously. And three, and most importantly, there's just a very large community, and it's very easy to learn online. There are so many questions that have been asked before your question that you have, or there's so many times that same question has been answered. There's blog posts, there's courses, there's just so much information. And there's definitely a similar community for other languages. But I just have found that JavaScript in particular, which honestly is not the most beginner-friendly language on earth, has the most beginner-friendly community. I just mean that the language itself has not been designed for newbies to learn, But that doesn't mean that it's impossible or difficult compared to others. Just sometimes the syntax is not as clean or something like that. So that would be a couple of simple steps. And then I would recommend, nobody likes doing this stuff, but at some point you've got to learn working with the terminal if you're not familiar with that, working with Git and GitHub. Those are a little bit less sexy to a lot of people because you're not immediately making something. It doesn't seem impactful right away, but if you want to get a job, you have to know those things. And if you want to collaborate with anybody, if you want to make something larger, more substantial, you're going to need to know those tools. So those are important to get out of the way. I used to start with those when I first started teaching because they are so essential and foundational, but I found that it can be discouraging and just boring to do up front when you don't really have, you're like teaching someone the workflow for how to work on a large project before they can make a super tiny project. And some programs still do this, and some courses lead off with Terminal and with GitHub and Git and all of that. It's important, but I wouldn't start there. It just, unless you're interested in it and you feel like it's exciting, then go ahead. But for a lot of people, it's not right away, or it doesn't seem immediately that exciting. You're not making something appear in front of you. You're not, making a web page or an application. So I would touch those after learning the basics of JavaScript. And then from there, there's so many directions you can go into. Typically, I would recommend learning more about how the backend works, even if you don't intend on being a backend developer. So working with the database at some points, learning the basics of SQL, learning how a server works. And you can, the nice thing about learning JavaScript is that you don't have to learn another language if you do want to write server-side or backend code. You can work with Node.js, which I, again, don't know where everyone's skills are right now, but it's just JavaScript that you can write on the back end or on the server side. So that's another reason I recommend it, is that you can have this one language that you start off with and still work on all sides of the stack so that you can get a nice overview of how everything fits together. So that's really my approach when I'm teaching, and what I hope people get out of it is a high level, I won't even say a high level overview, but an overview of all the pieces, how they fit together, and enough experience to then decide where you would like to specialize or where you'd like to focus more. And then from there, there's so many directions you can go. So those would be the basic steps I would outline. And really the biggest one there is learning JavaScript, or learning that first language. And that takes a significant amount of time compared to learning HTML or learning the terminal. So even though it sounds like it's relatively straightforward, I think most people know, or if you've ever tried and failed, it takes more time, more effort, and it's, I won't say it's harder, but it's just a bigger tool or bigger topic to fully know. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about practicing and actually making stuff instead of just reciting stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's not a foolproof recipe by any means, but that's kind of what I would recommend is try and get a broad scope eventually of a broad point of view of just how the pieces work, figure out what you enjoy. But I would start with something simple and a quick win like HTML and CSS, and then move to JavaScript.
That is highly, highly tactical information, folks. So definitely take notes on this. This is being recorded as well. So I know that he mentioned a lot, and you can always go back and like replay it, take these notes, but like he definitely outlined like a very solid step-by-step plan that you all can follow. Before I hog up a little bit too much time here, I did want to actually jump into your experiences with teaching both online and offline. And now that like the environment is obviously like offline or online only due to the pandemic that's kind of going around, we are kind of living in like this bizarre environment, this bizarre time right now. But there is a sort of like this adaptation that's kind of happening. I'm wondering, I was curious to hear about your take on like working remotely or learning online, as opposed to doing that in person, what the major differences are, and like, how does someone make the most of that? How do you kind of like make that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a big topic in general, right? I think everybody, to some extent these days, is running up against the shortcomings of online communication, or just, I mean, for me personally, I'm sort of I'm a bit of a hermit myself, or a recluse, I guess you could say. So I've been doing a lot of online communication and lots of working remote for a couple of years, but there's still, I guess there's two things I want to get at. One is that I think we know that there's a big difference between communication in person and communication online. That doesn't necessarily mean that online is bad or worse, but I think it takes a lot more work to make it as successful. I mean, even just, talking to your friends, or talking to you guys here, it's a very different experience to see 20, 30, I'm not sure how many people are here, faces staring directly at me on the screen, versus if we were in a room together and having a conversation. You're not all just going to be staring at my face the entire time, right? You're not looking ahead. It's just tiny differences, but it still is it's a different experience from being in person. Then you take something as important as learning a new skill or changing careers and doing all of that in person versus doing it online. It's tricky. And for a long time, I taught in person and I focused almost exclusively in person. I would do workshops online, or maybe things like this, sort of happy hour question and answer sessions. And then I put up a course online where I focused on making the content, the lectures, the curriculum similar to what I had been doing in person. Because that at that point in time was really the only thing I felt comfortable trying to put online. Because I knew everything else, I didn't have the resources, to have like teaching assistants and to have immediate feedback for students and code reviews and be able to answer their questions quickly, to provide any sort of mentorship, do mock interviews. All that stuff just required a lot of infrastructure and money, and I was just putting the curriculum online. And that worked well, and a lot of people were interested in that, but it's still nothing like taking an in-person course, whether it's with me or anybody else. The expectations are different, just the atmosphere, being in a room with, even if there's no teacher there, if you're just in a physical room with a bunch of students who are trying to learn something, there's conversations that come out of that, just being around other people, right? You learn a lot from the person sitting next to you, or you teach them something. So those are all things that are difficult to replicate. And for a long time, I had been thinking I'd say almost nonstop about how to bring something online that I felt comfortable with and that I thought was really close or better in some ways than an in-person experience. So I won't really sit here and pitch you on what I have now, but basically I've tried my best to bring an in-person experience online in as many ways as possible, which does mean things like providing a community where we have, the obvious simple things like chat rooms and having TAs who answer questions as soon as you ask them, and having happy hours that are kind of like this right now, and generally smaller groups, but 7 or 8 students who are kind of together and asking questions and telling jokes and having a bit of camaraderie, but also sharing code and reviewing solutions. We have code reviews, we have all the projects, assignments, and it's something like 900 different videos that I recorded for this, 900 different lectures. So a lot of content, but it's not exactly the same. And I'm being very honest here, which I probably shouldn't be, but there's pros and cons to doing it online versus in person. And the biggest frustration I had doing in-person teaching was seeing students, especially in the bootcamp space, seeing students who would move across the country and go into debt, and be sharing an apartment with a bunch of people who are in the same situation in the most expensive zip code, or not the most expensive zip code, but one of the most expensive metro areas in the country. It's just a very stressful, difficult spot to be in for the majority of people in this country. And it almost inevitably worked out in the end, but it was kind of a terrible experience for a lot of people. The stakes were so high, the blood pressure was high, the stress, everything was just amplified. So in an online environment, what's great about it is that, yes, the stakes are still high and people are trying to change careers and it's important, but people are still able to, at least until a couple months ago, hold on to a job, or work on the course over the weekends, or work on the course when their kids are asleep. And that was important to me, because trying to quit your job, and even if you're not moving across the country, just doing something full time. I was getting paid to do it. I was a teacher, and it was exhausting. And I knew the material. And if you're somebody who has the added stress of trying to learn it and trying to get a job and support a family or support yourself and pay back loans and all of that, I just saw a lot of students, crack is the wrong word, but I saw cracks starting to form. And the boot camps that I worked at were pretty rigorous, but I mean, there were some others that were a lot stricter, that would, have tests every week and would cut students every week without fail. And it's a very different feel. So when I say that the experience is different online, I think we all know that it's very difficult to exactly replicate the experience of being in a physical classroom with people. But we've done the best that we can, and all of, online boot camps and online courses in general, I'd say there's some lazy courses that are really just videos. And I mean, I have those myself. That's what I started with. I didn't have resources to do anything else. And that's certainly useful for a lot of people. But so much time and effort and money still needs to be spent to figure out how to really make an online learning as useful as possible. I mean, I talked to my little brothers who are in 4th grade right now, and their online experience at a public school in Massachusetts is pretty abysmal. Not that I would expect it to be figured out, immediately overnight anyway, but there's so much to be done to figure out how you actually can teach something effectively online to most types of people, most ages. There's so much left to figure out. But I'm doing my best to try and make it as compelling as possible. And yeah, so there's pros and cons, I guess. I'm going on, but that's kind of how I feel about it. I don't feel comfortable saying, there's a one-to-one and exact replica online experience of an in-person boot camp. But I think that can be a good thing too, because you're not getting the side effects and some of the negatives that arise from an in-person boot camp. You still have flexibility to have a life. If hopefully some of you guys still have lives going on in the past couple of months. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions about it and talk more if anyone has questions about the details and exactly how I've tried to bring something online from an in-person experience. But that's one of the most important things to me, is just being someone who does teach in person and really caring about in person. How can I make something online that feels as close as possible?
Yeah, that's going to be definitely huge, just from like an accessibility standpoint in and of itself. I love that point that you made about like the traditional, I guess, even boot camps aren't traditional themselves, but like the traditional path for boot camps would be like going and like doing this whole venture where you have to take on this, period of time where it's super high stress, very high stakes, and you're still not entirely sure of the outcome. But I really love the equalizer that the internet has really given people, so everyone's actually able to access these resources.
Well, and just one thing I'll add real quickly, if you don't mind, is that as crazy as the current situation is in this world, and the emphasis on remote work, I think, is only going to increase. And I've only seen this, maybe it's a bit of a in the Bay Area, at least, where rents for offices are so high. I've seen multiple companies, and a couple that my friends work at, where they've just decided to give up their office lease because it doesn't make sense. Obviously, for right now, it doesn't make sense to be paying 6 figures a month to have an empty office in downtown San Francisco. But also, there's multiple companies that are going fully remote, and I think that's another. It kind of goes in. A lot of the reason a lot of people would come to San Francisco or to New York or wherever these boot camps are, just a local city, was because that's where the work would be, and where they would be trying to get employed afterwards. And it'd be easier if they could interview in person, if they could meet people there. And I don't know what the long-term fallout will be, but so far it seems like there certainly will be more remote jobs, especially for developers and engineers, where it is easier, and a lot of these companies already had a couple of remote developers or a remote team or a team, offshore somewhere. So trying to teach online and trying to get people jobs online is going to hopefully become easier, or at least less. It won't be harder. I'll put it that way. It should be only easier and easier as more remote jobs pop up and more companies switch to remote, which maybe is a bright spot in this horrible sea of darkness. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah, it definitely has kind of provided as like a catalyst or a forcing function for companies to kind of rethink how to approach remote work. Like even Career Karma itself, like most of our team is remote, and we've been, working fairly hard, like developing constantly. So yeah, it's definitely an exciting time, but also it is kind of like that silver lining in kind of a sea of like this dark, not depressive, but like hard times. It looks like
I would say depressing.
Yeah. So it looks like iPhone, it doesn't look like you have a name attached to your Zoom account, but iPhone, do you have a question? And I think Jared, you're right after, and I think Michael right after that.
I think that's me. I'm
Yep.
trying to connect the camera, but it won't work. I'm sorry.
No worries.
So my question is for someone who finished bootcamp already and it's in the process of applying for jobs. So what would be tips or recommendations on how to approach this without, like you said, the traditional way, no degrees? So how would you go about that?
Yeah, I think the number one thing for anybody who has graduated a boot camp and is looking for a job, or somebody who's self-taught and didn't attend a boot camp, or whatever the circumstances are, if you're looking for a job and you have no current experience in engineering or web development, the most important thing is to have some project. Portfolio is what, everybody talks about, having a solid portfolio with multiple projects. I personally think what's most essential is to have something that you can show off, even if it's just one thing that's well done. And a lot of people get caught up in this. They think, I've seen students, I talked about paralysis, not knowing where to start learning. I've seen a lot of students get paralyzed trying to figure out what project to do. Like it's, some life or death startup that they're trying to get funding for. They have to come up with some unique, incredible idea. It's not really, you don't have to do that. You don't have to come up with something unique. You don't have to come up with something that hasn't been done before. You're not trying to demonstrate your skills as a thinker or an ideas guy. You're trying to show your skills as a developer. So I've seen many students get jobs just simply cloning sites that already exist, or making a slight tweak of something, like even if it's silly. I've seen one of my friends, one of my students made a clone of Airbnb that was for like evil villains, and it was called Evil Layer B&B. And it looked, very similar, same features. I mean, it didn't have every single feature, but it was very full featured for a typical portfolio project. So there's no shame in just giving up on trying to come up with some amazing, unique idea that you could eventually, get money for and charge people to use. That maybe will happen for some of you, but for the most part, if you have one of those ideas, run with it, but don't sit there panicking that you don't have an idea. I would focus on something that is tested, that when I say tested, I just mean something that, how should I put this? Something that demonstrates your abilities and your skills as a developer, something that is complex enough that it doesn't seem like, you followed a tutorial to make it. It's not a project you made following one of my courses or someone's YouTube video. It's something that you really spent time on, and even if it's just one thing, that's fine. So that would be my main advice, and I wish it was easier, because that does take time. It takes a lot of time, or can take a lot of time. But it's also, if you're hiring someone, it's the best indication of what someone can do. Because from the company side of things, from their perspective, if you don't have a traditional academic background, right, you don't have a transcript that shows you got a 4.0 in web development or something like that, that doesn't exist right now. What else is there that you can really show? It's not, you can interview and you can get your foot in the door, and you can get lucky if you know someone. And even then, typical interviews are really not great at testing your abilities as a web developer, as an engineer. It's hard. It's very hard to figure out. It's hard enough to figure out what type, if you're a fit for a company, or to get to the the core of who someone is in 5, 10, 20 minutes, but then trying to figure out if they're a competent developer and what their experience is, all of that is really hard to do. But if you have a project that can demonstrate that, and you don't have to say anything and you can just show it to them, it speaks pretty loudly. So that would be my main advice, is just to make something that you really want to show off. And don't feel like it has to be amazing and original, but it should be polished, and it should not look like this is a beginner's project. So that's actually why I recommend cloning things a lot of the time, is because the design is there. You don't have to, be a designer. I've seen many students write amazing code and then kind of ruin it with really bad UI, where if you're not a designer, and I'm not a designer at all, a lot of us still have this idea that we might be able to do it. Maybe we're cut out to be a designer, or maybe we can make something look nice. But most of the time, it doesn't look great unless you know what you're doing. So there's no shame in using themes or in cloning a website. Or, if you have a friend who's a designer, or if you want to, spend 50 or 100 bucks, I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but there are options if you're not very design savvy. And you just want to make something that does not look like it was cobbled together and it's held together with Elmer's glue, and it feels like a real project. And there's a fine line between that and then a full-blown crazy application that a team of 20 or 30 developers worked on. It's not quite fine, but there's a line there, and you want to be closer to something being polished and impressive than something that screams that you made it at home alone, and that you're following tutorials, if that makes sense. Show it to people, get feedback, and really take the feedback to heart and incorporate it into your project. And I would say, in person, when we have students working on portfolio projects, it's a full-time thing for the last 4.5 weeks of the course. So there are lectures in there. We're talking about interview prep. So let's say it's more like 3 weeks full-time of working on a project. So if you're doing this part-time, or if you're doing this on your own, that could be a couple of months of work if you're doing weekends, or if you're doing nights, or whatever it is. So don't expect to pull something together over a weekend and be able to get a job with that. So I hope that doesn't sound too doom and gloomy. The upside of all of this is that all you need is a good project. So it might take you a while, but if you have that project, that really can speak for your skills. It's not like, if you're a writer and you have to write a good novel, it's hard to get anyone to read it. It could be amazing, but it's going to take someone hours or days to really tell if it's any good. If you make a website, an application that you're proud of, and it really looks good and it has the features that are impressive, you can show it to somebody and they can tell in a matter of 30 seconds or less that maybe you're worth talking to. So that's my main advice. It's a long way of saying projects are important. Focus on making one good one.
Great question, by the way. I think, Jared, you have a question?
Yes, sir. How you doing, guys? I wanted to ask Mr. Colt, because I'm still interested in data science, software engineering, but I also like game design. I actually wanted to ask, what would you recommend someone to learn? I know you recommend JavaScript, and that's going to be essentially paramount with everything. But what would you recommend for that? What would you recommend learning if you want to go into game design, 3D, because you're going to deal with 3D modeling and everything.
Right. Do you have an idea of where? Are we talking like console games or mobile games or computer games?
I prefer console and computer mostly. I'm leaning toward mostly console as anything else. I don't really care for mobile. That's just me.
Okay, well, yeah, it's funny that I actually originally wanted to make games when I was starting out. I think like maybe not any guy in high school, but at the high school I was at, in my group of friends, it was pretty much everyone was into games, and I wanted to make games. And that was right around when the iPhone was coming out, and there were all sorts of people who had made like on their own like millions of dollars with these little apps and games. And I thought it sounded great, drawing the art and making the music and doing all this stuff. There's a couple things I would say. One is that unless you're incredibly talented at all of those, it's really hard to make it all, come together as a one-man band and really make it work. And the games industry is surprisingly, if you play games, you probably know this, it can be brutal. for whatever reason, the schedules, the release schedules, it's way worse than if you go into data science or you go into web development. At least on average, it's really weird. But the people I know who are in it are doing it because they really love games and they're excited to make something they care about. So my advice would be, yeah, JavaScript is not really going to be used to make, I mean, it's used to make browser games frequently, but it's not really performant. If you're interested in making like full-fledged 3D games, for a console, you're probably going to want to go towards something like Unity down the line. I don't know if you've heard of Unity.
Yeah.
And what I would do before you start there, because it's overwhelming. There's so many different panels. And I mean, there's courses, my Udemy course is long. It's like 40, 50 hours. There's courses that are intro to Unity that are like 150 hours. So I would not start there. The thing about Unity is that this is getting a little bit into the nitty gritty, but I would go with something like Python or with JavaScript, knowing in the back of your mind that you're going to pick up another language when you get to Unity. So if you learn JavaScript, if you learn Python, Unity works with a couple different languages. And there's one that is very similar to Python, but it's not the same. Basically, get comfortable programming first before you go to games. Because all of a sudden with games, you've got a million other skills thrown in together. So you don't have to make websites. You don't have to make, do any crazy data science, but learn the basic functions, loops, conditional statements, all the important parts of programming, and then go to Unity. If you try and learn it at the same time, you're probably you may give up. I would.
I have one last little question to that. That's okay. Both. Is that okay with you also, Melvin?
Sorry, say that again?
I said it's okay if I ask one more thing with that?
You go for it.
Okay. Because I was actually wondering, because like, a lot of people are doing a lot of remakes and dealing with some like older games from the 90s. And some of my favorites, I would actually like to see if there's a way to get like their code for them to see how they like what they used back then to make them. How would you recommend going about doing that? Trying to figure out what code they used on those, like, because I know like a game called, I don't know if y'all ever heard of it, you might have, called Tumba or Tumba 2 and Tumba 2. Those came out like one came out like early 2000s, the other one came out in the 90s at like near the end. Right.
Well, I think there's a couple of things I would say. One is that for some games there is code available, but for the majority of games, the game publisher, the company goes out of their way to make sure that you don't have access to the code base. But there are, depending on the game, there's lots of open source clones that people make. So I don't know how far back you're talking about, but there are clones of, like the original Pokemon games or Mario Kart games and things like that, where it's not the same original code base, but people are making their own versions and they have to tweak some of the graphics and everything. But there are projects out there if you really want to see how a large game works. The other thing is that a lot of these games were written in proprietary frameworks and tools that don't really exist today, or they're not up to date. So even if you could get the code of some old, some old game for like GameCube or Xbox or something, or PS2, you may not really be able to do much with it unless you want to really, be like a pioneer and going into old stuff. So yeah, I would look into open source clones. There's a good community around that.
I might have to ask for your help sometime in the future. I might have to reach out.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, so it looks like we have 10 minutes left in the event and a lot of engagement. So there seems to be a good queue of people wanting to ask their questions. So that's really exciting. Colt, I don't know, how are you like pressed on time? Like, do you think we can get through all of these questions?
I've got until like 6:15 or so.
Okay.
And also I was just going to add, I can answer as many as I can through text in that.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know, we can talk later, but we could easily just set up another time to do this again.
Yeah. I guess for now then, we can probably do a lightning round to try to get through the questions that we can. If there's a little bit more nuance with some of the questions that are like super high valuable, maybe we can really like tease that out. But yeah, everyone like go ahead and like throw in the chat. See if you guys want to have Colt back on, or maybe we can host an AMA on the discussions forum. It seems like you all have like really great questions, and a lot of you are, you know, super engaged. So this is definitely great signs all around.
Yeah, I'll just say for me personally, it's a lot more work to type up a text answer than to give like any useful input over text. It takes like a paragraph, and I'm just never been a great writer, unfortunately. So I'm happy to do this, whether it's to go long now or to set up another time next week or even this week. I don't know what everyone's schedule's like, and, you know, Career Karma has its own full slate of stuff. But if there is a time that makes sense, I'm happy to do it again.
Totally. Yeah. Let's just go a few minutes over here. Just try to get through the questions, and then we can see if we can get you back on. I think that this is super high value. Okay. So Michael, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hey, how you doing, Colt?
Hey.
All right, so my question is more so about your education teacher brain. A lot of times when we're taking tutorials and we're looking up the classes you've done at Udemy, things like that, we you know, take it in and we learn it, and we think we got a good idea of what it's like, and then when we have coding challenges, we kind of get this like, we kind of find out that we got like a false sense of like the knowledge we had. What do you think would be a good effective way to kind of like break that, to where you like do the tutorials, do the classes, and do something else where we know we can feel like we're secure in the information that we learn?
Right. Okay, well, the first thing I'd say is that there's, unfortunately, in online education, there's really there's two forces at play. One is teaching somebody something and getting them to understand it, hopefully, but just teaching it. And then two is keeping somebody engaged and keeping them as part of the course or part of your program. And sometimes those they're at odds at times, because when you're talking about like learning a language and learning the basics, the fundamentals, you might feel good about that in the course, but then you go to taking something, doing a coding challenge or really testing your skills, and you might feel like you've been, you know, you're flat on your ass again. You're like, I've felt that myself when I was starting, and I've seen many students feel like they're confident, and then all of a sudden they freeze up. They feel like they have no idea actually how much they don't know, or they're suddenly realizing how much they don't know or where they are. And a lot of online courses, including some of my stuff on Udemy, to be honest with you, it has to be easy at the beginning. It has to go through this progression where somebody hopefully will stay engaged, because as soon as we hit them with something difficult, like what I would do in person, we can give you a hard question and you won't have to panic, because you'll be there with a mentor. You'll be there, like, you know, at a whiteboard, and your classmates are kind of all going through the same thing. You don't have the option of just shutting a laptop and going into the other room, right? You're like part of it. And that's where a lot of learning happens, is when it is a little bit harder, or it's not stressful in any way. It's just, you don't have the opportunity to just leave. But in an online setting, it's so easy just to stop, or to shut the laptop or watch a YouTube video. So a lot of the courses that are just intro courses, and as I said, I've done this myself, you have to make things a bit smoother and less abrupt. You don't want to have those walls that somebody hits, even if they're useful walls. And so what I would say for you is, it's important to build your confidence as you go through, but as you're taking a course, whatever the topic is on, go and research that topic on your own after you get through, let's say it's the first 5 videos on functions in JavaScript. Go look at another resource, or another 2 resources, free resources, YouTube videos, and you'll see most likely there's more detail that was not covered, or there's stuff that there just wasn't time to talk about, and really well round your education on that one topic and flesh it out before you move on. And also keep in mind, you're going to have times where you feel like you mastered something, and then you realize you still have a lot left to learn. I mean, that will never stop happening. It will be on different topics, but there's still many times where I feel like I understand something and I go to explain it. Somebody asks me a question that really reveals or exposes how little I actually knew about this one thing. So part of it is getting comfortable with it too.
Thank you.
Ken?
Hey, Cole, how's it going?
Hey there.
My question was, what kind of like projects or ideas do you have for someone who's interested in back-end programming?
Yeah, that's always a tricky one. The first thing I would recommend is whatever you do, still add on some sort of front end that's appealing. So yeah, that could be as simple as using a theme, like using Bootstrap. Or I don't know how, what your experience is, but there are tools out there that can help you make something that might be a bit generic looking, but it still looks polished. And that's definitely better than you just being, making it clear that I'm not a back-end guy, but still, please give my project a chance. Unfortunately, you just need to have something there. But in terms of ideas, what I would say is it's always interesting to incorporate interesting APIs, and there's a ton of them, whether it's something involving sending text messages or phone calls, or doing some sort of interesting login. Like, I don't know if you have heard of like Magic Link login. I think that's what it's called. Like if you log in for Slack or something, you don't have to actually type anything. So implementing something like that is a great way of demonstrating something, adding payments in, scraping, doing web scraping and getting information from websites that may not have an API. And then doing anything with background tasks or background jobs is also a good one. So if you were to scrape, for example, how could, writing code that every day is going to scrape to find new campsite reservations that are available, or to find, mentions of X, whatever it is. But having something that is recurring in the background is another pretty common thing that opens up the possibilities for what you can do. So find some APIs you're interested in. And obviously another thing is interesting data itself and difficult challenges with data, storing it. The hard thing with a project is a lot of the times with back-end stuff, the impressive work that goes into optimizing something is not going to be immediately evident to someone looking at your project, right? Like if you spend hours and hours figuring out how to best store X data in your database, or how to optimize some SQL query, if it works well, no one's going to know. So another thing I would mention is making it clear what your challenges were, and providing some sort of write-up, or just a simple document, or being able to talk about it and present your work where you make it clear, like this was the hard part, and this is the stuff I'm proud about, even if it's not flashy right away. This is what matters. If my website were to scale up and have millions of users, I still feel like this would continue to perform, or whatever it is. Like you have something ready to talk about with your project. Hopefully that helps a bit.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
All right. Damiko? Is that how you pronounce that? Sorry if I butchered that.
No, that's fine. Hey, Colt. Hey, I'm just curious. I think Michael probably asked the question is probably similar to his. I'm in a boot camp and everything, and I'm having a tough time. So I purchased your course for JavaScript, and I was just wondering, what is the best way to go about learning your JavaScript course to help me, with my program? And is there any help online on Udemy whenever we get stuck on your online course?
Yeah, I'll start with the last part. There are TAs, teaching assistants, who answer questions, but I wouldn't rely on something like that, to be honest with you. Sometimes it takes hours to get a question, or if it's over a weekend, it can take some time to get an answer. And there's just so many people on there that even, I've had to hire some more TAs recently, and it's important, but it's not ideal from a learner's perspective. So I totally recognize what you're saying about wanting to have some sort of support, or something that it can feel a bit tricky. I mean, I don't know what bootcamp you're attending right now and what the curriculum is like, but I know that can be it can feel isolating or tricky when you're stuck on something, and maybe some of your other peers aren't, or they're not talking about being stuck, or you might feel left behind, or I don't know what it is, but I've had many of my students go and get other resources. So I've been on both sides of that, where I'm noticing when I was starting out, I would see my students actually looking at like Khan Academy in class, and I would stop and be like, what's going on here? like you're learning this right now in this class with me. Why are you, looking at some other resource explaining it? And over time, I realized, well, there's ways for me to improve my teaching, but also no matter how good my teaching is or isn't, there's still a place for other topics or other people teaching the same thing. And you might learn better from someone else, or you might learn better from text instead of video, or video instead of whatever it is. So my recommendation would be, if you are going to take my JavaScript course, don't bog yourself down too much. I don't know where you are in your bootcamp course, but don't try and do too many things at once. So take a deep breath. And if your course is already covering JavaScript and you feel like you're behind, then absolutely, you won't really be able to get much out of anything else until you get the JavaScript portion down. Assuming that their curriculum is in line with most boot camps, like things build on top of the JavaScript. So I would take some time to do that and set a schedule for yourself. Do a section a night or a section every 2 days or something. And then, if there's some sort of community where, see, this is the thing, like with Springboard, the boot camp that I've launched, we have recurring conversations and chats and all of that, but it's still, you have to apply. It's a big sort of deal. It's a hurdle, lots of hoops you have to jump through. It's not as simple as just, I want to talk to someone about coding right now, or I want to ask a question and get some help, right? It's like a 6-month, 9-month commitment. I still wish that there was, and maybe there are some options out there where it's as easy as, I'd like to talk to somebody for half an hour right now, and not commit to 9 months of, 10 grand or whatever. So I'm not aware of something exactly like that, but I know there are communities. There's things like Career Karma, but there's also more focused on, JavaScript communities or Discord channels and Slack channels. There are ways to find like-minded developers or students. On Reddit, there are different communities for learning JavaScript, and they'll have like an online meetup every week and that sort of thing. But I can tell you seem, I could be totally wrong, but you seem stressed out about it. And I think that's pretty normal in my experience. So my main advice would be, don't freak yourself out too much by trying to do it all at once, because it's just an easy way of stressing more than you're actually learning. So take it one step at a time. I don't know, the bootcamp that you're at, I would definitely talk to them and let them know if you're not feeling like, you're getting enough out of it. You feel like you're not picking up JavaScript fast enough, or you're struggling with it, and let them know, because honestly, most boot camps, with some exceptions, they're going to care more about making sure that you are going to be able to learn what you need to learn. Like, there are some that will just take your money, unfortunately, and I won't name names or anything, but most of them are still going to prioritize you learning something. And so they might be open to you taking some time and pausing, or going into another cohort, or having some additional tutoring, or giving you some additional resources. For the most part, I would hope that they would do that. That's what I would do, because if you're struggling with JavaScript, it's not hopeless by any means. It's just an important topic that people learn at a different rate. And some people have experience with it or other languages and programming before, others don't. So I wouldn't beat yourself up. I would take it seriously, obviously, as you are, and just try and go about it in a disciplined way, maybe an hour a night, or maybe do 2 hours, and then try and find some place you can talk to somebody, whether it's someone at your boot camp or it's someone online that you don't know. It's a chat group, something like what we have going on right now, but more focused on JavaScript. Hopefully there's something that you can find, because it's hard to do it alone.
I'm with Kinsey Academy, so I'll definitely talk to them. And mine it's 1 year. It's a 1-year cohort. Yeah,
I would just be honest. They're not going to want you to feel like you're behind or stressed the entire time. So I would just talk to them and tell them where you're at. Tell them where you're at.
All right. Anthony, seems like you're up.
Hi, Colt. What advice would you give towards older students in starting out, and just wondering about your experience?
Yeah.
You might see.
Definitely. So the main advice I would give you is still the same advice for everyone else, which is to have an impressive project and have something that, honestly, this is very cynical, but in in an online world with more remote work, I think it may work to your advantage, because it's unfortunate. Ageism is still definitely a thing. I don't know if it's a thing, around the country, but I've seen, I've worked with students who are up to 74, actually. It's the oldest student I worked with in person. And for almost all of the older students, quote unquote, older, I guess anyone over like 55 or something, which you don't look like you're up there yet. But I've noticed that it does sometimes take longer for them to get jobs. But actually, most of them ended up getting jobs just fine. It definitely took longer, which is the sad part. But they were fully competent developers. But the biggest thing is still a project and having something that really shows that you know what you're doing. Because for a lot of companies, it doesn't really matter, especially if this is the part I think is cynical of me, but I think ageism, and I mean, just like any other of these isms, comes from, at least in the workplace, it comes from people who are looking for someone like them to be in the office with them every day. Maybe that's wrong, but I certainly have experienced or seen some of that in small offices I've been a part of. So in an environment where you may be able to do an interview online, or your portfolio might speak for itself first, it can help you get your foot in the door. But there's a lot of companies that really won't care, right? I'm talking about just some of the like bro-y startups in the Bay Area. Maybe it's a bit of a stereotype, but I think there's some truth to them, and I've certainly been in some of those offices. So if you can, make something you're proud of, and I don't know where you're based and where you're trying to find work, but there are a lot of older engineers in different parts of the country where there's more of a legacy in engineering. It's not new tech startups, but it might be American Express has had their offices, and I can't remember where, but I have some students who are in an office in Arizona, and most of their coworkers are in their 40s or 50s as developers. Or parts of, my brother-in-law works in Alabama, I can't remember the town, one of the like NASA towns there. And he works at a tech startup, but all of his developer peers are way older than him as well. So there are parts of the country too where the norm is to be a more seasoned older developer who maybe has been around for longer than just this tech boom. So there's definitely hope. I think you recognize that it's not as easy potentially, depending on where you're looking to try and work, but also there's lots of opportunities. So just make something impressive if you can, and put it out there. And that's all I would say. I mean, I wish I had something better. But I will say, even in San Francisco, I have seen plenty of people in your position and much older, and older women too. All sorts of, there are different things that make things more complicated. But I've seen them actually end up getting work in some of those bro-y startups too.
Great, thanks. Very encouraging.
Awesome. So I think we might have time for one last question before we close things out. Fatima, did you want to go ahead and ask this and close things out?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hi, Colt.
Hi there.
Hi. So I'm currently at your bootcamp Springboard, and so far the curriculums are really great. I feel like I'm learning a lot, but since we are learning a lot of things in this 6 to 9 months, how to be successful as well as practicing as I'm moving across the different like front end, back ends, and all those. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I don't know how far are you? Did you just join recently, or?
Yeah, so I joined end of March. So right now I'm currently at almost end of the front end.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm almost on the front end. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's you've made some good progress. Yeah, the things that I would say, not just for Springboard, but really for any program online, is to set up a schedule for yourself. And I mean, it sounds like you made good progress already, so you're not having trouble, staying on track. But in general, and this is something I have to do when I'm recording my own courses, I have to set up some sort of structure of X number of hours a day, or, I'm going to work these days and take these days off. It's easy in an online world if you're not actually, in a conference call every second of your day, to at least for me, to get distracted or to focus on other things. So first of all, I would set up some sort of structure if you haven't already. And then I would make the most of your talks and calls with your mentor, and really come prepared for them. So this is something that in person, I would tell my students the same thing. Don't show up to a conversation with your mentor without a checklist of the things you want to talk about specifically, the questions you want to ask, the things that you would like to get feedback on or have your code reviewed. As easy as it can be, just to have a natural conversation. To get the most out of it, I would always have a specific list of what you want to talk about and think about it all week before you talk to your mentor. And then the projects, the assignments, obviously there's the big projects that, that take a lot longer, but for any of the small projects, any of the little assignments, I would take them as seriously as you can and try and do them without looking at a solution, without, I'm not saying without trying to get help, but just trying to do it on your own as much as possible. That's always really important too. So, and those all kind of apply to all online boot camps or online programs. But do you have was there a follow-up? Is there something else you wanted to get feedback on? Because that was kind of a general answer. So let me know if you want something more specific.
Yeah, so I know that there are so many projects, like smaller to bigger projects, but when I have to do those bigger projects like gaming, like memory games, I got stuck, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm not getting all the, technique that I watched from the tutorial, and I got discouraged and, where do I start? So how do I?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a very important, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, where there's a difference between what you learn watching something, watching a lecture, watching me or someone else, and then when you're faced with a blank text editor and you're having to write a project or make something real, it's a big jump. And don't feel intimidated. It's natural to, but don't feel intimidated by that. Really, what your job is to open up those videos again or look at the notes, which, we give you those notes on purpose so you can have them with you. Look at old code that I've written or that you've written from a previous assignment and just get it to work. Make it Frankenstein code base that works. Like, that's just part of it, is making it, realizing something doesn't work, Googling something, getting stuck, banging your head against the wall, asking for help, talking to your TA or a mentor, talking to your peers over chat. Like, so much of it is just not knowing exactly what to do at one moment in time and then trying to figure it out and then incorporating that and then getting stuck again. It's over and over and over. And eventually it doesn't feel like a panic inducing moment anymore. It starts to feel like that's just what it is as a developer. But when you're starting out, it's a little bit intimidating. So take a deep breath. If you get to those projects where you feel like you were following along fine, and then you get to the projects, it's a little scary. You're not sure exactly where to start. One option is to just pick somewhere and just try and get one tiny piece to work. Another option is to talk to a peer or get some input from somebody else and brainstorm with them. What do you think I should start with? Is this a good approach? I was thinking of, storing this data in an array, but then this other, you might hear some different points of view and you might get some interesting inspiration there. But really a huge portion of it is just doing it and recognizing that you're not going to get it perfect right away. And you might see someone in the class or in the Slack group, say things like, "Oh, I got this right in like 2 hours. It was so easy." Don't let that sort of thing get you down. It just, everyone comes from a different place, and everyone has certain strengths that will show, whether it's with SQL and databases or with CSS or with JavaScript. It's just, don't get bogged down in comparing yourself to others or feeling like you're behind. Because if you are truly behind, we will be the first to let you know, and try and work a plan and put a plan in place to help you get past that. Because, one obvious reason is that we care. The second obvious and blunt reason is that we have to care because there's a job guarantee. So it's in everyone's interest to make sure, right, that you're on track. So don't feel ashamed about it. And I would say this for anybody learning any of this stuff in any boot camp, whether it's a competitor or if you're just doing it online. don't feel shame about getting stuck or about having to ask for help, because honestly, that's what it is to be a developer. And the questions you might ask get harder, but you're still going to be asking questions and Googling stuff nonstop. You're never going to be a walking encyclopedia of every single line and every piece of syntax, and that just won't happen. I mean, maybe there's some amazing brains out there, but for the most part, it's just not the case. So don't panic. Break it down to tiny pieces and talk to somebody whenever you can, if that helps you. Talk to a peer, talk to a TA, talk to your mentor, and just brainstorm, and try pair programming too. Find someone who's at a similar place as you, and get on a video call with them or FaceTime or something, and just share your screen and talk it through. That's another way of really making some good progress.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's really helpful. And also, I'm currently taking like a week break and start doing like mini projects so that I can, reapply all those practice and make sure I'm learning well. Because I'm kind of person like who doesn't want to go to the next part if I'm not knowing everything.
Yeah, that's a common attitude. No, that's very common, but it's a good thing. It's probably gotten you far before, and I would say I'm the same way, but you have to release some of that. You have to be comfortable not mastering it all.
Okay. Thank you, Cole. Appreciate it.
Good luck.
All right. So before we close this off, I actually did want to make one announcement. So for the people on this call tonight that want to join Fatima and take Colt's software engineering career track at Springboard, we actually have partnered with Springboard, and we have scholarships available for those of you that don't have a laptop, and potentially like that's the only reason why you wouldn't consider going into one of these boot camps. So definitely take advantage of that resource. The only thing that you have to do to apply for this scholarship and qualify for it is just make a post on the Springboard's discussion asking about anything related to the application process, or just attending Springboard, or even, continue asking Colt questions on the Springboard discussion forum. And then just share that with your Twitter feed, get your friends involved, because there's a lot of resources that are gonna, we're going to continue to provide with the community, partnering with such great folks over at Springboard and a lot of these other places. So definitely spread the love, spread the word, and get other folks to join in and kind of level up in their own careers. So I'll actually share the Twitter link here for everyone else to kind of see who else is kind of getting involved with that. So Colt, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you? I think you might be muted.
I'm muted. Okay, good. I said I work so hard not to be found, but I'm kind of joking. In general, I just suck at social media, to be honest with you. I wish I had started like a Twitter or Facebook when I first posted my courses, and I just suck at it. So YouTube is really the best place to get in contact with me. There's some email on there as well, like for it says for business inquiries, but it's where a lot of students message me. And if anyone does try and reach out to me over email, I would just say I do my best. I set aside an hour a day to respond, but there's just a lot of messages I get, and it can be difficult. So don't hesitate to like just ping an email again or send it again, and just please recognize that there's a lot, a couple hundred a day, and it's difficult for me to keep up. But also there's LinkedIn, which I really don't use except to talk to students. So that's another option. But YouTube is really where I spend a lot of my time. I make videos on topics that students are asking for. So I'll send out a poll. If you turn on notifications and all of that, if you subscribe, you can give me feedback and sort of submit ideas on what you'd like me to teach and all of that. So that's probably the most interactive place.
Yes, definitely check out that YouTube channel. It is very, very high quality content. And Colt gave such great tactical advice. There's much, much more. Just try to find him, even though he's trying to hide around, right? Try to find him on YouTube, LinkedIn, use those resources. And Colt, I'm going to close this off with one final question. And this question is actually geared towards everyone that's on this call tonight, not just to listen to the words you say, but to actually walk away from this AMA event being able to implement it. And so my question to you is, what is one thing that people can do this week that'll move them closer towards their goal of breaking into tech?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things, but one easy thing, without knowing where everyone's skill level is and sort of where you're at, I would say if you just spend an hour a day, if you're a complete beginner, an hour a day going through some beginner course, or not to plug my own YouTube stuff, but I've been doing this free YouTube course that's like 20 something days in so far, just for complete beginners. And each day it's around 40-ish minutes, and there's some homework. If you just commit to spending that much time on your own, just a little bit of time a day, that can make some huge progress. But also, if you're not doing a course, if you're already an expert, not an expert, but you already have learned, maybe you're a graduate from a boot camp, wherever you're at, just spending as much as or as little as an hour a day doing any coding or any, absolutely hate any networking. As I kind of alluded to, I just am a bit of a introvert, and I don't like doing it, but doing any sort of outreach, especially if you're somebody who, is not the typical like young white guy programmer, making connections through LinkedIn, just virtual connections, making friends, going to virtual meetups, just anything to enrich to make it so that you're not just in a silo or a box learning to code on your own, having a community around you. So yeah, learning to code is important, but a very simple thing that might be painful for me at least, but very easy to do, is to just connect with some people on LinkedIn, ask them for input. I mean, even approach someone for mentorship, or just have them in your network so that a couple months or a year down the line, you can send them something. Here's my project I've made. Especially if you can find people who maybe are similar to you, who have gone through the hurdles or the gauntlet of getting a job in tech from a non-traditional background. Those can be super beneficial. Some of the people that I mentioned, some of the older students I had, they found older people in tech and on LinkedIn and sent them their projects and their resumes. And it wasn't like an overnight instant thing, but those connections help. So put yourself out there. It's a cheesy thing to say, but spend just a couple minutes a day networking, which really in today's world is pretty much just connecting with people on LinkedIn or commenting on articles, asking for advice on Reddit. There's just a lot that goes into getting a job and being a developer that isn't writing code. That's very important, which is why I started with that being my advice. But I also would say it's important to just spend time sort of on that maintenance side of things and meeting people. Even if I hate it, it's still important.
I think that is very wise advice, and hopefully everyone here takes that and actually does something with it. So I would love to hear each one of you post on discussions about your experiences, spending that 1 hour every day, just learning how to code, going through that complete beginners YouTube video. Definitely check out Colt's YouTube channel. Definitely great stuff there. But give them feedback, reach out to people on LinkedIn, plant those seeds way before you need them. And I guarantee you that you will thank yourself tremendously in the future. So Colt, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And everyone else on this call, thank you for spending the 1 hour and 24 minutes that you have. It is an investment in your future. So I commend all of you and I applaud all of you for doing that. So yeah, thank you all, everyone. Colt, thank you again. And everyone else, you can unmute yourselves, thank Colt, and then we'll just call this a night.
All right, have a nice night, everyone.
Thank you, Colt.
Thanks, Colt. Thanks, everyone.
Colt. Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Good night.